Hello, everyone. Welcome to Politics in Perspective. I'm Tom Del Beccaro. I think this is a great show. Super happy about my guest. Before we get to him, though, we'll have my opening statement in which I will talk to you about why the national debt really matters to you now. You may have thought in the past, it's just out there, but it matters now. In our Difference Maker interview, I have Frank Morano, who is a rising star among Republican ranks. He's a city councilman in New York, which means he has to deal with Mamdani. This will be a great interview. I'm looking forward to it. In the political roundup section, we'll do our quick hits. I want to thank Ex American News on Twitter for carrying us, worldviewtube.com. We're on YouTube, of course. We're on AUN TV, Rumble. And at politicalvanguard.com, you can see all of the shows, the complete lineup over the last year. So let's just get right to my opening segment. So, the national debt. It's out there. It's been out there. Andrew Jackson was the last president who had it at zero. It's been growing ever since. That's a hell of a long time. And now it's actually affecting your wallet day to day. It used to be in the background. It's not in the background now. It's actually stealing money from you every single day. If you look at this chart, this is the U.S. national debt, the federal government national debt. Take a look at it. Take a look at when it exploded. In the 1970s, it exploded. That's when television came around and politicians started promising people things on television, and it got worse from there. Now, there's something about the federal debt you need to know. It's obviously exploding, but it also tracks right along with two other charts I'm going to show you. So let's get right to those two other charts. This is the total spending. Again, look at 1970. Spending explodes from the 1970s on, really starting in the 60s. Again, that's the age of television and now the internet, where everything's a problem and there's an ambitious politician who wants to spend your money. So the debt's exploding right along with the spending. Now the left wants you to believe, okay, we need to raise taxes and get more revenue because that's what's causing the national debt. Well, let's look at the next chart. This chart shows you that, as I was saying earlier, the spending tracks with the public debt. See how those two curves look almost identical? Meaning they spend more and more and the debt goes more and more. Now let's go to the next chart, which I referred to a moment before. There's the revenue of the federal government. Doesn't it look amazingly like the debt chart and the spending chart? I mean, it's pretty damn exact. Now let's go to all three just to make the point. There they are. Spending, debt, revenue. All of them in the 60s and 70s start to go up. And of course, they've exploded in the last 15 years. So, and by the way, from the 70s to now, we've had Republican presidents and Democrat presidents. We've had Republican Congresses and Democrat Congresses. Republicans in charge of the Senate, Democrats in charge of the Senate. I saw a video recently of Milton Friedman back, I want to say, in the 80s. And you can Google it. And Milton Friedman standing in front of the White House. Actually, he's on the roof somewhere. And he turns and he goes, this is in the 70s. Where he says, doesn't matter who's in that house. The debt keeps rising. And these three charts, demonstrate that it doesn't matter who's in the White House and what the spending level. It doesn't matter who's in the White House. There's still more the money coming in. And it doesn't matter who's in the White House because the debt's still rising. Now, look at this when it comes to the revenue. Never let anybody on the left tell you again, we have to raise taxes. Because as Milton Friedman often pointed out, the great economist, when you raise tax revenue, they just keep on spending. And these three charts are absolute proof of it. Now, these are just charts. Why should it matter? Who cares? I'll tell you who cares. You now have to care. Because at these levels, and it's getting to 40 trillion in debt, and if you can see from these charts, there's no end in sight. But why does it matter now if for 50 years this has been going on, or since Andrew Jackson, the debt's been starting to build? Well, the answer is because at these levels of debt, it is now impacting the interest rates that you pay. Now, the American economy today has three major sectors that are looking to borrow money. The private sector, big business, especially with a huge increase in the amount of credit that the AI sector is seeking. The AI companies, the big tech companies, are looking to spend money on AI, and they have huge credit demands, meaning they're seeking loans in this process. So big business is in the marketplace for loans. You know who's also in the marketplace for loan when you have a national debt of 40 trillion? Because what that national debt means is it needs to be refinanced, portions of it all the time. Because what happens is the government borrows money each week, and then once it borrows it for a period of time, and then it has to refinance it. So the more the trillions go up, and keep in mind, interest on the debt is now second or third largest budget item, Medicare, Social Security, and debt. They're all bigger than national defense. But my point is, government is in the marketplace for loans. And you're in the marketplace for loans. You may want to buy a house. You may want to buy a car. You may be a small business looking for money. So now we have increased demand because of AI, increased demand because of government and debt, and what you want. Well, what happens when demand for a commodity, a service, or loans rises? Usually the price of that product rises. The higher supply and demand. The higher the demand, the more something costs, right? If everybody's going after a Elmo for a Christmas present for little kids, the price tends to rise. If everyone's after a purse, a particular car, anything, that's supply and demand. And so this huge demand on credit is causing interest rates to rise. Also factor into that inflationary pressures, because these deficits, which are adding to the national debt, are also causing monetary inflation. They're printing money to cover it up, these debts, or to pay for them. And you cheapen the currency, and that's what true inflation is. You bring all these things together, and interest rates are higher. Excuse me. You can also talk about how the Biden inflation, but also how the failure of Jerome Powell keeping interest rates at virtually zero for so long also did damage to the economy. But it matters to you today because increased lending rates, the cost of credit rising, affects you when you go to get that car or when you go to get a business loan, SBA loan, any loan, even your credit cards. And of course, long-term interest rates are higher and mortgages are based on those long-term interest rates. All of this is a part of what is called the expectation theory of money, which is that if you expect inflation in the future, or the opposite, if you expect no inflation, you react differently. If there's an expectation of inflation, then people will charge you higher interest rates for your loan because they know if they don't have that higher interest rate, they'll lose money in the future. Think about a 30-year loan on a mortgage. If a 30-year loan on a mortgage is 6%, let's say, but 5 years from now they expect inflation to be 8%, they're not going to make you that loan at 6-7%. They're going to raise it higher because they have an expectation of higher rates, higher inflation, all of that, and it costs you more. So my point in all this is, for many, many years, the national debt has been growing. Many of us who care about economics and how it affects our lives have been warning us that this was going to come home to roost and it was going to hurt the economy and many other aspects, bankrupt the country, on and on and on. Well, it's all here now. And what's the solution to this? Is the solution we should tell business to stop borrowing money? No. We want them to grow the economy. Is the solution for you to stop borrowing money? No, we want you to have houses. The bad boy in all of this is government. The bad people in all of this are the politicians who keep on borrowing money. All of that's got to stop. So whatever you think about the midterm elections, this is your pocketbook. It's too much spending. And Chuck Schumer says he wants to restore $1.5 trillion of spending that the Trump administration took off from future increases. So on the midterm is, are you going to vote to make this worse? Or are you going to vote to start to stem the tide? Are you going to vote in Democrat control of Congress? Or are you going to keep them away because you know they'll lead to the Biden inflation risk one more time? I know how I'm going to vote. And if you don't think the national debt affects you now, after this, I sure hope you do. Well, that's my opening segment. I'm Tom Del Beccaro. Of course, please join me on Substack. Also join me at politicalvanguard.com, my media site where you can get the news you need to know day to day, and tomdel.com. We'll be right back. Hello, everyone. Tom Del Beccaro. Welcome back. I am super excited about this segment, the Difference Maker interview. I try and interview people making a difference. And this is a guy who you need to start to follow. He is young. He's articulate. He understands economics. He is a rising star among Republicans. Who knows whether he's going to be mayor, congressman, or what? But one thing I do know, he's right there in the catbird seat now because he's on the New York City Council. My longtime friend, Frank Morano. Frank, how are you, boss?
Tom, first of all, you gave such an incredible introduction. I was waiting to see, wait a minute, who's he going to introduce? That's something. It is great to talk with you. Congratulations on all the success that you've had on the podcast already. Whenever you have a column, whenever I see you on the radio, or whenever I know that you're doing anything, your analysis is so unique and unlike any other pundit that you read or hear on the radio or see on television. And your audience is really lucky to have someone so insightful that actually has the wisdom of having been in the arena and knowing what's what. But it's a pleasure to join you. And people, if they haven't read your book, I know it's behind you, but your book was incredibly prescient in terms of where the country is today and where we're going, and hopefully some pitfalls we can avoid.
Frank, you're very kind. All right, folks. You're on the New York City Council. Everybody talk. A year ago, I wrote about how Mamdani was going to define the Democrat Party. Okay, so you're there, but I have so that people get a sense of magnitude. If we can bring up this slide, LA's a big place. It has 15 members. New York City has 51. So my first question to you is, how the hell does that work? Do you all 51 get together? What is that like?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's funny, when I meet with municipal leaders, legislators, or mayors around the rest of the country, that's the first question they ask because they can't conceive of a municipal legislative body this large. Yes, we meet, all 51 of us meet once or twice a month, usually no more than three, but most of the work is done by the committee system. So there's a health committee. I'm the chairman of the veterans committee. There's a fire committee. And that's where you'll see testimony. That's where you'll see a lot of back and forth. That's where hearings take place. And then when all 51 of us get together for what they call the stated meeting, that's where the debate and the rules of engagement are a little bit more restrained to allow all 51 of us to speak on an issue, but not necessarily turn every meeting into a 9-hour dogfight.
All right. So everybody talks about DSA these days. Everybody talks about Mamdani these days. You actually have to work with the guy. So New York City budget is how many dollars a year?
It is going up exponentially, but it's about 116 billion.
I mean, that's bigger than how many states? Like almost.
It's bigger than how many countries? Let's
Yeah.
look at that.
Okay, so
Billion.
tell us, people want to know, what's it like behind the scenes instead of the headlines?
Well, it's such a good question. So there are so many ways to answer this, right? So let me talk about the broader political context in general with the ascendant DSA and what's going on within the Democratic Party, and then I can speak about Mamdani specifically, either personally or politically. So in the New York City Council, you mentioned there's 51 of us. There are 5 Republicans and there are 46 Democrats. Used to be 6 Republicans up until January. One of them, great council member, unfortunately lost re-election. So now there's 5 of us. Of the 46 Democrats, there are only 4 that are avowed DSA members, but there are about 20 that ideologically fit within that DSA framework. They are the largest caucus, the Progressive Caucus, and they carry a lot of sway. Now, fortunately, they were not able to elect the speaker in January. There were 4 or 5 progressives that were running for speaker, and only one, I don't even want to call her a moderate because she's really just a standard liberal Democrat, only one non-progressive that was running. So she was able to coalesce all of the non-progressives and pick off 1 or 2 of the progressives that she had relationships with and organize labor. And she was able to build this coalition. And the speaker that got elected in January was Julie Menon. And thank God for that, because had that not occurred, and the progressives controlled both the mayoralty and the city council, there would be no stopping. There would be no guardrails on the mayor's crazy radical agenda. Now, for the first time really in the history of the city of New York, the city council is the more restrained, the more moderate, the more adult force in the legislative executive dynamic. That being said, the dynamic in the council and more broadly in New York City politics, particularly after several DSA-backed candidates just took out incumbents for Congress just recently, is one of fear. It's almost like there are 2 parties within the Democratic Party in New York City, the DSA and everyone else. And that everyone else encompasses a lot of ground. You have organized labor, You have moderate Democrats. You have just regular establishment Democrats. And I have to tell you, the everybody else is really frightened. And in a city where in 80% of the districts, all you have to do is win a Democratic primary. And since that Democratic primary is closed, you have a situation where a lot of voters and elected officials, quite frankly, are pretty fearful of the direction that we're headed. So, one of the things that I'm hoping to do is build coalitions with the moderate and establishment Democrats whenever we can to beat back some of the more radical stuff that the DSA is putting out there. And I'm hoping, quite frankly, to use the fact that so many of these DSA people keep winning primaries to maybe pick off a couple of purple seats for Republicans in New York City and in New York State. So that's where we are. When it comes to Mamdani specifically, he is, like a lot of politicians, he's very personable on a personal level. He has shown a unique combination of both ineptitude and extreme ideology, and that's manifested itself in a number of ways, which we can go into however you want.
Okay, so Frank, I'm glad you said it that way. I have a New York Post op-ed that I'll bring up just so the readers can look at it. I said that what was going to define him was the fact that here's a guy who's never run a thing in his life,
Mm.
and that New York City's, you tell me, you're in the middle of it. Is not New York City one of the most sophisticated bureaucracies in the country? And I said he would be defined by his ineptitude. Can you follow on from
Yeah,
that?
I think you're exactly right. So a couple of things, and this is the one area where I will give the mayor a little bit of credit for. Well, one, I'll give him credit in two areas. One, I don't think the guy is openly corrupt, which is more than you could say for some of his predecessors. I'd be shocked if the guy was taking bribes. When you're wealthy and a trust fund baby, you don't need to take bribes. So I definitely don't think he's getting bought off. The other thing that I will say is he has selected a couple of very competent administrators to run very key city agencies. Obviously, Jessica Tisch at the police department, she gets the most attention and deservedly so. People can agree with her, they can disagree with her. You can't say she's not qualified. And that can be said of three or four other commissioners. Beyond that, his ability to run the bureaucracy of New York City government is incredibly lacking. And this has manifested itself in real serious consequences. The snowstorms and the people that died in the snowstorms last February, the recent Legionnaire's disease outbreak, again and again, he's shown that this is a team that's really not ready for prime time. That New York Post editorial, Mayor Klutz, they're basically asking the right question. Forget socialism for a minute. Can you run the place? The mayor, I think, during the campaign talked about sewer socialism, being able to be socialist but get things done. And when I met with him before he took office, but after he had won, I said, all right, so we're going to disagree on the issues. That's an area that we can work together on, getting things done. So far, he hasn't. New York City government is an enormous enterprise, hundreds of thousands of employees, enormous agencies, labor contracts, capital projects, public housing, schools, cops, firefighters, sanitation, transportation, social services. This is not a college seminar where the best argument wins. So somebody has to make sure the garbage gets picked up Tuesdays and Thursdays in my case, or Mondays and Thursdays in my case. And really, I don't think that that's of interest to the mayor. The mayor is interested in gimmicky social media videos. He's interested in being perceived as a leader of the extreme left. I disagree with the mayor ideologically, but ideology isn't even my first test anymore. My first test is, can you make the trains, streets, schools, and agencies work? So far, I think the mayor's shown himself to be very lacking. New York City is not a Substack. You can't govern it with a really good thread. And I don't know that the mayor has come to realize that yet.
Okay, Frank, is that not true of Spamberger, of Mickey Sherrill, of Gavin Newsom? They're picking these ideologues to do very serious management positions. Like, I ran against Kamala Harris. She
Yep.
couldn't run a lemonade stand. But
Yeah. Well, look, in the case of, I mean, obviously you could speak to the Gavin Newsom example better than I can, but I think if Gavin Newsom had found himself living in and working in and trying to make a career in Alabama politics, he'd be as conservative as Jeff Sessions is, right? I don't think he really believes in anything, honestly.
I
He will take any position necessary if it means one iota of political power or political advancement. I mean, what do you, is that?
No, I've been saying that to these people. I mean, he blows with the wind. And the problem with him blowing with the wind so much is he does ridiculous things. Okay. Like the wealth tax. I was going to go to this last,
Right.
but it's such a clear thing. And you are so good on economics, folks. That we're talking to Frank Morano. This is a comer. This is a guy who is articulate, but also understands economics. I saw you. I contacted you right. I texted you right after your last thing with Varney.
Thank you.
Let's get right to the economics of this, because you're there. You're allegedly part of the to have to work with this. Newsom wants a wealth tax. Mamdani wants a wealth tax. If we bring up that last slide, Annie, about here it is. Everyone wants to tax the rich. Well, not everyone, but I mean that's the story of New York. How is this coming along? How is it that did the whole city council vote for this tax? What is going
No,
on?
no, actually, so this is again an area where I don't want to hurt her by praising her, but this is an area where we got very lucky in having a non-left wing speaker. The mayor met with all of us that are on the finance committee and a couple of other council members, and he basically he laid out two scenarios. He said, we either get, we meaning the city council, we either get the state to give us permission to tax the wealthy and tax corporations and institute a huge income tax on high income earners who are already paying through the nose, by the way. Or if we can't get that, we're facing something along the lines of an $11 billion budget gap. And their only choice is to raise property taxes on everybody across the board. Now, he was hoping that this would scare all of the council members and say, oh my goodness, I don't want to tell my constituents they're going to have an 8.5% property tax increase. Well, let's go along with this tax the rich strategy in Albany. So lo and behold, the numbers kept changing about, it was almost like if you've seen Manchurian Candidate or people that remember Joseph McCarthy, his number of communists in the State Department kept changing, right? It's a $12 billion budget deficit. No, it's $7 billion. All right, we got $1 billion here from Kathy Hochul. Now it's only $5 billion. So anyway, they were able to close this gap without any of the broad-based tax increases that Mamdani was talking about. The one thing that he did get Governor Hochul to go along with was this pied-à-terre tax, this so-called tax on second homes. We did not vote for it in the city council. It was instituted by the state legislature, even though the city gets the money. The problem with this, in a nutshell, and I don't mean to be so long-winded, but I'm trying to give context for some of your viewers around the country, is three things. One is the tax itself. This is a great way to drive more jobs and more investment out of New York. Two is how it was marketed. Less than a year after Brian Thompson, the CEO of United Healthcare, was gunned down in Midtown, Mamdani is in front of Ken Griffin's house saying, this is the poster child for everything that's wrong with city government. He basically took these, and you talk about this in your book a little bit, but he took these burning embers of class warfare and dumped a whole bunch of gasoline on it. Now, he could have tried to sell that wealth tax or that second home tax in a manner that was conciliatory, that was unifying, that didn't demonize rich people. He could have taken a mom of three who's working 5 jobs in order to pay the bills for daycare and said, you know what? We're going to be able to help provide health care and child care for this working mother if only we get this pied-à-terre tax. He didn't do that. He was more interested in vilifying rich people with this sinister smile on social media. And then the last part about it, and this is what has gotten a lot of my Democratic colleagues upset, even the ones who are okay with this pied-à-terre tax, is the rollout. They have totally bungled the rollout. They ended up sending this notice that you owe taxes for the second home to a whole bunch of people that don't have second homes. It's crazy. The problem with tax the rich as a budget strategy is that eventually you run out of rich people before you run out of spending. New York has managed to turn wealthy residents into both villains and essential revenue sources. Those are two roles you'd better think very carefully about combining, and yet that's what the mayor's trying to do.
All right, folks, we're talking to Frank Morano, and one of the things Republicans need to understand is the ability to connect with people and use the media around them. Giuliani did this when he was mayor, and I think it was 48 on the different. And Frank is one of the people who gets this. This is why we need to support him going forward, whether he's a congressman from his area or the future mayor of New York. God forbid for his. If you have gray hair now, Frank, I can't imagine. But okay, so let's get to like very serious topics.
Yeah.
Education for New York was in the news recently. We have a slide about this. You may have seen that. The people listening may have seen a headline or two, but the reality is the vast majority of the kids, or a huge percentage of them, are not getting educated. But are they going to change course at all, or is all they're doing is going to throw more money at it? And what do you think? Here are some of these horrible numbers. 34% of the kids in elementary are in failing schools.
Yeah.
Half of the middle schools, high schools, 62%. First of all, tell us what a failing school is, and is anything going to change?
Yeah, so I honestly, unfortunately, think the only thing that may change is the standards. We may see Albany relax the standards to make it look like fewer schools are failing, and that's a sad situation, but it's what I can absolutely see happening. So you have about half of the students tested aren't proficient readers, and about 4 in 10 aren't proficient in math. The Department of Education's own performance reporting showed that in 2024 and 2025, and we can't blame Mayor Mamdani, for this, but this has been a trend that has gone in the wrong direction for quite a while now. Regents passing rates of only 53% or so in math and 54% in science, with declines from the previous year. Imagine any other $30+ billion enterprise announcing that half its customers aren't getting the basic product and then declaring the real problem is insufficient spending. Before we reinvent algebra, I want kids, and I went to public school, and my son is going to enter public school in September in kindergarten. I want kids to be able to do algebra. We've developed a remarkable education vocabulary in New York. We can say stakeholder engagement or holistic outcomes and equity framework. I'd also like to hear Johnny can read. A diploma should be evidence of an education, not a souvenir from whatever school you went to. The cruelest education policy imaginable is pretending a child is succeeding when the child can't read at grade level. So you compare that with the rates at Success Academy, which is a leading chain of charter schools in New York City. They reported 91% proficiency in reading, 96% proficiency in math. You don't have to endorse every feature of Success Academy to say when the same city, often similar economic circumstances, produces such different results. Policymakers ought to be curious rather than defensive. So I'll give the mayor credit for occasionally defending the SHSAT, but he and I disagree about plenty. But he was right not to destroy a successful institution because government has failed children early in the pipeline. The SHSAT, for people that don't know, is a test that you take to get into specialized high schools. We have some of the best high schools in the country, maybe the world, and they're public schools, but you have to take a test to get in. And there's because so many of the people that end up getting into these schools is Asian, there's now a concerted effort to do away with this test. The obvious example to me is how do we get more schools like Brooklyn Tech, Stuyvesant, Bronx High School of Science? That's not the question that any of my colleagues across the aisle seem to be asking.
Yeah, unbelievable. They turned a high school diploma into a participation award.
Exactly.
Not something that shows that they actually can do this. So you combine these things because this is what it affects America nationally. We have to have kids that are educated to deal with the future economy,
Mm.
right? New York City is losing people, they're leaving. The finance jobs are leaving. So, okay, we can talk about the problems. You have solutions. I know you do. There are things that you would like to emphasize on the economy of New York City, which is so important going forward. I mean, this is should be the shining star economically of the country. So should California. I can talk about California. Talk about New York. What would you like to see New York City emphasize, and also New York as a state? Because it's so important. And besides getting rid of Aaron Boone and Cashman and the management of the New York.
I got to be honest. I'm a Met fan, so we have a lot more to worry about than what the Yankee fans do. That's another one of the few areas that the mayor and I have common ground. We're both long-suffering Met fans.
There
Uh,
you go.
but so I've got a lot of solutions when it comes to look. The problem is the city needs a management agenda, right? I'm less interested in whether the commissioner of whatever agency has the right ideology than whether the commissioner answers the phone. Government should work more like a diner. You order eggs. Eventually, somebody has to bring you eggs. City government sometimes gives you a stakeholder meeting about the concept of breakfast, right? So really, we need to push productivity. New York City has hundreds of thousands of employees. Even modest productivity gains across such a large operation can make a huge difference. So we need to consolidate duplicative administrative functions. We need to reduce the consultant dependence where city employees can perform the work, modernize procurement, scrutinize overtime, scrutinize vacancies, require actual performance evidence before automatically increasing a program. One of the things that I know we were emailing a little bit about, or you mentioned that you saw one of my commentaries, is the mayor's office has 52 officials that have chauffeur-driven cars, full-time chauffeurs.
Oh, wait a minute. I need to stop you there so we
Wait,
can highlight this. Here's a guy who claims to care about the plight of the poor. 50 people in his office, and you ride the bus.
that's right. That's right. Apparently, the classless society comes with a chauffeur. Had I known that, I might have signed up earlier. But the administration wants ordinary New Yorkers on the bus or on the train, while 52 officials are asking the driver to pull around front. I'm not against official cars. I'm not. If the police commissioner needs one for security purposes, or the sanitation commissioner has to get from Queens to Staten Island right away, fine. If your job truly requires a chauffeur, tell taxpayers why. If it doesn't, congratulations, you've just been introduced to the subway. So I think it's a mentality that needs to change. So I'm trying to make the city government a little more normal. Chauffeur reform, one example. Government responsiveness, another one. There's a lot of common sense things that we need in Staten Island, which is a little bit more of a suburban part of New York City, but it is part of New York City. I'm trying to get a right turn on red study for Staten Island. Apparently, a maneuver that's legal in most of America becomes a threat to civilization the moment you cross the Outer Bridge crossing. There's a big problem with e-bike accountability. We need it's like the Wild West with these kids on e-bikes. And unfortunately, the mayor in March instituted an executive order to dial back enforcement rather than go the other way. So we need registration. We need enforcement and insurance of the safety of we need insurance for the vehicles and then enforcement of the safety rules. I think if it has a motor and flies down the street at 25 miles per hour and could put somebody in the hospital, calling it a bicycle doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So more broadly, I think we need electoral reform. Part of the reason city government has gotten so crazy is because all you have to do in 44 districts, basically in the 51 in the city council, is be the most left-wing person in a Democratic primary and win. I think if you saw a situation where independents could vote in primaries, you'd have to see candidates running with a more realistic and broader-based agenda so that they weren't just trying to appeal to the narrow left-wing constituency.
So, all right, that's a lot. And you know what? the vast majority of what you talked about wasn't ideological. I've
Mm.
tried to get people to understand this. 80% of what government does not have to be ideological. Should there be an ideological way to fix the roads? In California, there is. I think New York City is falls into this trap as well. So okay, so now let's get to the where the future holds, because I only got you for 4 or 5 more minutes. Where are you going? Where'd you start with this? You won 3 elections. Was it in 20? What year?
In 2025, that's true. So, my predecessor in the city council, who you know as well, Joe Borelli, he left a little early. So there was a special election for his seat in April. So I got elected in April. I took office a couple weeks later, and then right away I had a Republican primary in June. Was lucky enough to win that as well, and then won a full 4-year term in November. So April, June, and November,
Is
we're
that a record?
three. I think it might be. I think at least it's got to tie the record. So now I'm in for the next 4 years, and I'm up for reelection in 2029. And I got to tell you, Tom, and you have an appreciation for what I'm about to say more than most do. In that, I left a pretty promising career and a pretty good career on the radio. And it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed doing what I was doing on the radio, but I really felt like this was an opportunity, especially at this point in time, for me to make a real difference for New York City. And I'm not trying to sound corny, but for my children. And I am very cognizant of the fact that I only have one more election left before I'm term limited. So I am trying to squeeze in 30 hours of work in a 24-hour day every single day. People can like what I'm doing, they can dislike what I'm doing, but I don't think anybody can say that I'm not doing anything. I am everywhere. I'm as chairman of the Veterans Committee. I'm trying to put veterans issues back on the forefront of the New York City agenda. As a guy that represents Staten Island and the outer boroughs, I'm trying to fight for this forgotten New Yorker that doesn't have a lobbyist, that is not part of DSA, that just wants to work, do their job, pay their taxes, and get home in less than a 2-hour commute. As the as a co-chair of the Italian caucus, I'm trying to fight against the attempt to erase Western civilization, especially as personified by symbols like Christopher Columbus. And as chair of the Common Sense Caucus, which is a bipartisan group of council members that wants to pursue a lot of non-ideological solutions, I want to work with Democrats. I want to work with everybody to do right by New Yorkers. And that's a tone, and this is not unique to New York. It goes on all over the country. That's a spirit and a tone that I think is lacking in government and politics today. So that's some of what I want to do. I want to work hard. I want to get reelected, and then leave a real lasting legacy, or at least do what I can to stop the bleeding.
Folks, if you haven't been following Frank, now I get it. You're busy in your lives, but this is what Republicans need. Someone who actually understands the big picture, but also understands what it's like to have a broom in your hand and why that makes a difference as well. Frank, where can they follow you? Where can they help you?
I really appreciate it. Probably the best way is on social media. If you search me on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, and just search Frank Morano, Morano, a whole world opens up. I have a city council Facebook page that's more of interest for the issues that we're dealing with in city government. And then I have one that's basically a vestige of my radio days, which is more about commentary on broader national issues, sometimes international issues. You can find that on Facebook. Just search Frank Morano. But there's a lot of good content on both. People should follow both.
All right. So I look forward to you being in Congress, or you being the governor of New York, or you being the mayor of New York City, because you have a great understanding and you're young. So you're the future of republicanism. I'm being serious about this. I was chairman of the California Republic. I've seen a lot of guys come and go who couldn't explain their way out of a paper bag, or didn't understand economics, or didn't actually care about these everyday items. And
Well,
so you
uh,
traverse that.
I'm looking forward to your next race against Kamala Harris. And since we now both live in places where I think they've probably banned paper bags, maybe the lack of ability to explain your way out of one is less of a hurdle than it used to be.
All right, everybody. Frank, so thanks so much for coming on. I knew this would be a great discussion. Gotta follow him, folks. I'll be right back with more of Politics in Perspective. Welcome back, everyone. Tom Doblecar. Hope you enjoyed that discussion with Frank Morano. Uh, he's a guy you're going to have to watch because he is the future of, he's got a great future. We just got to help these kind of people along the way. All right, this is my political roundup section. So let's just do some quick hits because I want to get to my producer's new book. She's writing more books than I am, and it's very disturbing, but you got to read them all. I put this up on Facebook. I'm a capitalist. I just vote for more government takeover of the economy at every turn. Signed Democrat candidates. Have you been hearing them oh yeah, I'm a capitalist. No, you cannot be a capitalist and vote for the government takeover of the economy. That's what we're seeing out there. It's ridiculous. So either you stand up to the socialist communist wing of your party or you're not a capitalist. You're just faking it and drawing people in. Speaking of those, drawing people in and lying to them, let's get to the next slide, which is, California. California, this is a slide. California has some of the worst roads in the country. How's that possible? Well, because they have this gas tax and then actually don't apply it to the roads. But now California is going a step further. They're going to regulate what tires are going to be allowed to be sold. Because, in Sacramento, they have this unbelievable understanding of the market for tires. Point being here, not only do they, by the way, bad roads ruin tires early, and now they want to regulate what tires. Why is California dying? Boom. Speaking of California, Rob Bonta, who is trying to drive out Paramount from California. But if you go to the next slide, he also admitted that they don't keep track. Federal law says you got to do certain things with your voter rolls. California, under Rob Bonta, admitted that they don't track non-citizens on the voting rolls. Oh, but don't worry. There's never any trouble with respect to voter fraud. Oh, yeah? Rob Bonta, there he is, who suddenly has white hair, by the way. I guess he stopped coloring it. Next on the roundup. Speaking of lying to you, I'm not a socialist. I just want to do socialist things all day long. But also, his mother now, we already knew his father had connections to terrorist groups. His mother worked for a group that became designated a terrorist for the activities they were doing while his mother worked for him. Is this really America? Seriously? We now have candidates who have this close ties. It's unbelievable. Okay, next slide. Gets worse. The Democrats keep talking about how bad Trump is. We did this before. I just want to say it. Democrats haven't done anything in foreign policy that's been effective in decades. Biden and Obama gave money to Iran, lifted sanctions, turned a blind eye. Iran used the money to attack Israel and be the world's largest sponsor of. That's the Democrat record with regard to Iran. And yet they're complaining about the Trump record. Russia invaded Ukraine twice under the Democrats, but they're complaining about Trump. Biden's Afghan withdrawal was an unbelievable failure. Americans died. More Americans died there than in this Iran war. And that was an invitation for Russia, China, and Iran to do a lot. Under Obama and Hillary, ISIS became a world terrorist group. Trump ended that. Under Obama and Hillary, you had Benghazi. Anyway, my point of bringing this up is that the Democrats are saying that Trump doesn't know what he's doing in Iran. But that's the record of the Democrats right there. Okay, so as you know, my producer, Annie Cyrus, had an unbelievable book out, The Architect of Jihad, which you all should have. I still have it up on my nightstand. And incredibly, she's got another book out. And let's take a look at it. It's now available on Amazon. So Annie, tell me about the Quran paradox. Because folks, I want you to understand something right now. What's going on in American politics. These people are getting elected because we're sitting at home. Annie, talk about your book or talk about that.
Will do. Well, first of all, thank you. The Quran paradox. I started realizing the Quran paradox literally when I was 10 years old, but I couldn't write about it until recently. And the reason I wrote
okay, so where were you when you were 10?
I was in Iran. Well, some people
Yes.
call it Iran. I was in Iran when I was 10, and it was only a year after I became an adult woman. That's when I started realizing the paradox. But again, once or twice I tried to question it, or at least bring it up. The punishment was not worth it, so I kept quiet. But when I watched all these primaries go on, Tom, was exactly when I'm like, wait a minute. So maybe the architecture of jihad wasn't enough because people in America think, oh, this is terrifying, but not every Muslim. So let me introduce them to the book of Islam, where every Muslim reads it. Do all of them follow it to the T? No, but it's good to know the source. So in Quran Paradox, not only I walk through the verses of Quran itself to prove that this is absolutely not words of God, but I also show the cosmic trap set inside Quran for non-Muslims and Muslims, that no matter what, their only way out or their only way to heaven is to commit jihad. So it's kind of a part 2 of the first book, kind of connected, but it's more into the roots of it. No translation. I didn't use any muftis, any supreme leaders, my own opinion. It's word by word of Quran itself, and also compared side by side with Old Testament and New Testament.
Okay, so this isn't just an academic discussion. We have an election this November. There's a Senate seat in Michigan. The Democrat candidate says his life has to be beholden to Sharia.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
So what does that mean? What should a Michigan voter or any voter come to understand when a candidate says that?
Well, the number one part is a candidate who claims to stand by Sharia on a daily basis can never uphold our Constitution, because Sharia stands absolute opposite of our Constitution. This book helps you understand part of that because of the Judeo-Christian values of our Constitution. When you read this book, The Quran Paradox, you realize that Quran goes against not just our Bible, not just the Torah, but our actual Constitution. So the first thing you understand is this man cannot uphold our Constitution. Secondly, he cannot equally provide protection services or any of his duties for non-Muslims in his state or federal government for that matter, because Sharia tells him not to. Quran tells him on chapter 5, verse 51, "O you who have believed, do not take Jews and Christians as your allies and do not provide them protection." This is the man who is going to take Senate.
Yeah, and think about that. So what did she just say? He says, I have to live by Sharia. Sharia says that he cannot live a life where he helps Christians and Jews. Our Constitution does not allow for a higher law than the Constitution, but he believes Sharia is higher than the Constitution, which means that he can subvert it. That is the stage of where these candidates are. You don't have to believe me. You don't have to believe Annie, but you can see it in writing for yourself and make those judgments. And yet we have these candidates who say these things. And therefore, they're being at least honest with you, because there are some, as Annie will tell you, that will lie about it because that's permissible to do under the Sharia. Is it permissible for them to lie to you because that they still get to their ultimate goal? We're running out of time, but I want to thank you, Annie. Show the book again, please. This has been Politics in Perspective. I'm Tom Del Bacaro. That's our show for this week. We'll be back next week.